In this video, I will be talking about my favorite movies of all time, the How to Train Your Dragon trilogy. However, I will be explaining why I think these movies fail as a trilogy. I will also give a disclaimer now. I absolutely adore the first two movies, the second being my favorite of the two. And while I still enjoy Hidden World, it comes nowhere near the first two for me. I'll be exploring why in this video. The way I'm going to do this is by roughly working my way through Hidden World and addressing the ways it fails to build upon its predecessors. So let's start with the opening. Honestly, the opening of Hidden World does not get it started off on the best foot. After all, when the movie started, I expected to hear a rendition of This Is Burke playing as Hiccup once again introduces us to his home. Except that didn't happen, which instantly breaks the consistency of the trilogy. Instead, the film opens with a scene of freeing dragons from hunters. Maybe this could have worked if the scene had been executed differently, but what we got was a tease for an epic action scene that devolves into the characters all acting like chaotic goofballs. And this brings us to several inconsistencies. Hiccup and his friends are highly incompetent in this scene and don't work well as a team. They work better together in the very first movie in the battle against Red Death than here, and they also work well as a team in the second movie. So why are they so disorganized now? Then Valka tells them that they need to work together and not rely on their dragons to always save them. Valka, the woman who lived alone with dragons for 20 years instead of returning to her family. Her characterization completely changes in this movie, as it makes her the main advocate for doing things without dragons. She's only been back in society for a year now, so it seems like she'd be the one needing to learn how to work alongside other Vikings. As for Hiccup's other parent, you would think it would be hard to mess up the characterization of someone who is deceased. However, we do get a flashback to a scene with Stoick and a young Hiccup, and I feel a large disconnect from the Stoick we see there and the Stoick we see in the first movie. I understand that they wanted a heartwarming moment between Hiccup and Stoick, but I don't think it matches with the first movie. Hidden World claims that Stoick was hoping to block up the Hidden World to peacefully resolve the conflict between Vikings and dragons. This does not seem to match with the first movie at all, given in that film he is dead set on finding the dragon's nest and slaughtering all the dragons inside. Another thing to keep in mind is that the supposed death of Valka is still fresh on his mind, as the scene is likely just a couple years after she was taken. Given that he thinks his wife was killed by dragons, I do not see him seeking such a peaceful resolution. He is brutal and angry in the first film, but kind and tender in the flashback, set before he goes through that development. I could see Stoick after the first movie acting in the way he's shown, but not before. This is one of the few inconsistencies I see between Hidden World and the first movie. After that first scene in Hidden World, we get the more traditional "This is Burke" moment. This scene continues the tradition of the other two movies, albeit later than usual. It's discouraging seeing how chaotic things have gotten under Hiccup's leadership. The second movie sets him up as a strong chief, but everything seems to be deteriorating in Hidden World, which is disappointing to see. The second film shows him learning not to just focus on dragons, but how to have a healthy balance of helping his people and the dragons. In Hidden World, however, it seems that he has reduced the quality of life for the Vikings of Burke in an attempt to pamper the dragons. We see this with how the Great Hall is a mess of Vikings and dragons, and Gobber is understandably concerned by a dragon bathing in the soup. Hiccup has let the dragons get out of control, which I believe goes against what he learned in the second movie. The second movie focuses on Hiccup learning that
a chief protects his own,
and how to do that, whereas he seems to have forgotten that message in Hidden World. It also seems odd that Hiccup and Astrid are strongly opposed to getting married.
The M word.
I understand them not wanting to rush into anything, but it seems like they freak out way too much when Gobber brings it up. They've been dating for 6 years, and honestly, I wouldn't have been surprised if they got married soon after the second movie. Gobber also seems to suggest that Astrid would make a better chief than Hiccup, which starts undoing all of his development from the second movie. After all, they have a conversation about Hiccup not wanting to be chief in that movie, and how Astrid would love to be chief, but Hiccup grows into the role. One of the main points of the second movie is Hiccup learning that he's actually fit to lead, and is what Burke needs as a chief. So instantly, Hidden World is tearing apart all of the character growth of the second movie. Have I mentioned all of this is just in the first 10 minutes of the film? Yeah. we are soon introduced to the villain of the movie, Grimmel the Grizzly. His introduction comes much earlier in the film than the other movie's antagonists, and is in my opinion, the weakest. The first movie doesn't have a human villain, so I'll be focusing on comparing Grimmel with Drago. Drago's introduction has a lot of tension leading up to it, as he is teased at throughout the film with tales of his ruthlessness and strength. Grimmel's first appearance, while imposing, doesn't compare. The warlords really weaken his introduction, as they are largely comedic relief. They are working on building a dragon army, which is exactly what Drago was doing, and they make it sound as if he was working for them, which he absolutely was not. Grimmel makes it clear that he has no interest in the dragon army plan, he just wants to hunt and kill dragons. This may seem like it would make the stakes feel higher, but instead, Grimmel feels much more like an antagonist from all the How to Train Your Dragon shows, such as Viggo Grimborn, but with far less time to be fleshed out. I know some people find Grimmel fascinating because they say he is what Hiccup would have become if he had killed Toothless, but really, the movie doesn't explore that premise at all. If it had, he might have made a fantastic foil to Hiccup, but instead he remains a very basic villain. When first confronting Grimmel, Hiccup says that he's faced far worse, but Grimmel replies that Hiccup has never seen anything like him. That's when his Death Grippers attack and begin destroying Berg. While this showcases he has new dragons under his control, he is still using methods frequently seen in the movies and shows. Drago used his own intimidation and his bewilderbeast to control dragons, while Grimmel uses Death Gripper venom. I am glad, though, that the filmmakers did not just go for a bigger and badder again in this film. After all, the Bewilderbeast was a step up from the Red Death, but thankfully they did not try to top the Bewilderbeast, as that would have reached the point of being ridiculous. But the Death Grippers never feel like as great of a threat. Perhaps if Grimmel had a greater number of them, or the movie fleshed out the idea of them eating other dragons more, they would have felt more deadly. For me, Grimmel never felt even close to Drago with how intimidating or threatening he was. Drago's methods are far more frightening than Grimmel's, as he seeks to break the wills of both dragons and men. He succeeds in doing this throughout the movie, which shows his strength and brutality. Grimmel, on the other hand, is just a hunter who knows how to use his knowledge of dragons effectively. Drago is able to kill Stoick by controlling Toothless, and yet Grimmel doesn't even inflict any serious injuries on any of the characters by the film's end. In fact, this is the only one of the three films that doesn't have a serious injury or death to a protagonist. To me, I think it was pretty much impossible to follow up on a villain such as Drago for this film, as nothing could be more serious of a threat while staying as a kid-friendly movie, which is a big reason why I think How to Train Your Dragon 2 makes it so hard for Hidden World to succeed. The only loss that comes in the film is the decision to send the dragons away, which was prompted by Grimmel, but not necessitated. It still baffles me that once all the dragon hunters have been wiped out, it is deemed too dangerous to keep the dragons around. There's no way there's an even bigger threat out there somewhere, so it seems that now dragons and Vikings can finally strive towards peace. Plus, Grimmel didn't want Vikings and dragons to live together, which is exactly what happens by the movie's end, so it makes it seem like he was right that Vikings and dragons can't coexist. This leads me into my last and biggest critique of Hidden World: the ending. I'll say now, I love, love, love How to Train Your Dragon, as I grew up with it and have continued loving it. And yet, I didn't shed a single tear when watching Hiccup and Toothless's goodbye, largely because it felt completely unnecessary and contrary to the previous two movies. I had thought that maybe I was just in denial and needed time to warm up to the ending, but here we are 6 years later, and I still feel a disconnect from the end. I could actually see this ending working if this movie had been a sequel to the first movie. If this had been the first human-driven threat they had faced since getting their dragons, it would have made sense for them to be shocked and want to protect the dragons by sending them away. It also would have made more sense for Toothless to choose Light Fury if he'd only been with Hiccup for a relatively short amount of time. But there's a little something called How to Train Your Dragon 2, and that completely upends Hidden World's ending. The entire climax of How to Train Your Dragon 2 hinges on the unbreakable bond between Hiccup and Toothless. Not even after Toothless killing Stoick and Hiccup allowing Drago to take him is their bond undone. No, the movie shows that they come back even stronger than before. Hiccup is willing to give Toothless another chance, and Toothless is able to break free from the control of the Bewilderbeast through his sheer devotion to Hiccup. It is by working together as dragon and rider that they defeat Drago, and yet, Toothless is ready to leave Hiccup after 6 years because of the Light Fury, who he's known for maybe a week. I'm not going to trash on Light Fury because I actually don't take as much of an issue with her as others, but I do think it is completely unbelievable and out of character for Toothless to abandon Hiccup so quickly. In the first two movies, it is clear that Toothless has a much higher level of intelligence than an ordinary animal, but in Hidden World he seems to be dumbed down and relies on animalistic instincts. After all, Grimmel is using the Light Fury as bait because he assumes that Toothless won't be able to resist finding a mate. This turns out to be true, so it feels like Toothless's animal instincts took over, leading him to leave Hiccup for the Light Fury. I feel like we really don't get any good moments of bonding between Hiccup and Toothless in this movie that aren't interrupted by others, such as the Light Fury. In fact, this is the only movie that doesn't give us a flight sequence with Hiccup and Toothless that is just for fun. The first movie has Test Drive, one of, if not the most iconic scenes in the trilogy. The second movie has Where No One Goes, which is my personal favorite scene of any movie. I adore Hiccup and Toothless's flight sequences, and I feel its absence from Hidden World greatly. I believe that the Furies in Love flight sequence is the replacement for that moment, and while it is beautiful, it just isn't the same. That flight feels more akin to romantic flight, but nothing reminds me of Test Drive or Where No One Goes in this film. Not only does the ending of the trilogy not make sense for the characters, but it ends on a thematically confusing note. The first movie is about learning to accept the dragons and how to get along. The second movie ends with this.
We may be small in numbers, but we stand for something bigger than anything the world can pit against us. We are the voice of peace, and bit by bit, we will change this world. You see, we have something they don't. Oh, sure, they have armies, and they have armadas, but we have our dragons!
This shows the strength that comes with working together. United we stand, divided we fall. No matter how many people push back against what is right, we can get through if we stick together. Or, according to Hidden World, maybe we shouldn't stick together. Apparently Vikings are too stubborn to accept dragons, and that's okay. The dragons can just be sent away to live in seclusion until people are ready to accept them. But what kind of message is that? Run away from your problems until they blow over? Don't fight for what you believe in? I know that it shows sacrificial love with Hiccup being willing to give up his connection with Toothless to ensure his safety, but I think the message of sacrificial love already comes through frequently throughout the films, with all the times Hiccup and Toothless have risked their lives to save one another, and Stoick sacrifices himself to save Hiccup, so this ending isn't needed to convey that. This is why I believe How to Train Your Dragon 2 would have made a better conclusion to Hiccup and Toothless' story, as it ends on a far more uplifting note, and also presents a better message to audiences. Like I said, I actually think that The Hidden World could have worked well as a direct sequel to the first movie, but to me, it is pretty much incompatible with the second film. If it had come after the first movie, then it would make sense for Hiccup to struggle with being over-dependent on Toothless. I could see Stoick taking on Valka's role of emphasizing the importance of not relying on dragons for everything, as that advice would actually make far more sense coming from him. And like I said, if Grimmel was the first major human threat they had faced, it would be easier to understand the decision to send the dragons away. I've seen some people say that these inconsistencies make the second movie the weak link in the trilogy, but given the fact that it came first, it is really Hidden World that failed to live up to the others. And I'll say once again, I actually do enjoy Hidden World, but I think it could have been far greater if it had continued to build on the other two films rather than tear them down. Well, those are some of my thoughts on the topic. I've only been thinking about this for 6 years. Feel free to let me know your own thoughts down in the comments. That could be thoughts about things I addressed in the video or anything else you have to say about the trilogy. I'd also be curious to know what your favorite movie of the trilogy is. This is a new type of video for me, but I'm guessing I'll be doing more like this in the future. I might even review the live-action How to Train Your Dragon once it comes out, although that's if I decide to go see it. Thank you for watching.